The Second World War ended in 1945. It left Europe in ruins. Among the victims were 6 million Jews. This terrible event became known as the Holocaust. Many survivors had nowhere to go. After the war, many Jewish survivors were placed in displaced persons camps. The desire for a safe haven grew stronger than ever. For many, Palestine seemed like the only answer. The Holocaust had a profound impact on international opinion. This sentiment played a crucial role in the discussions about the future of Palestine. The survivors were determined to reach Palestine, often undertaking dangerous journeys. Great Britain had controlled Palestine since the end of World War I. The League of Nations granted Britain a mandate over Palestine in 1922. The mandate system was supposed to prepare territories for self-government. However, the situation in Palestine was unique and complex. The British were tasked with an almost impossible mission. They had to facilitate the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine. At the same time, they were also obligated to protect the civil and religious rights of the existing non-Jewish communities, primarily the Palestinian Arabs. These two goals often seemed to be in direct conflict. During their rule, the British faced increasing difficulties. Jewish immigration to Palestine grew, especially in the 1930s as Jews fled persecution in Europe. This immigration was welcomed by the Yishuv, the Jewish community in Palestine. However, it was strongly opposed by the Palestinian Arab population. The Arabs feared that they would be displaced and lose their land. They saw the growing Jewish presence as a threat to their own aspirations for independence. This led to rising tensions and outbreaks of violence between the two communities. The British struggled to maintain order. They were unable to find a solution acceptable to both Jews and Arabs. The Balfour Declaration was a public statement issued by the British government in 1917. It was conveyed in a letter from Arthur Balfour, the British Foreign Secretary, to Lord Rothschild, a leader of the British Jewish community. The declaration stated that the British government viewed with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. It also stipulated that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. This short document would have far-reaching consequences for the future of the Middle East. The motivations behind the Balfour Declaration were complex. Britain hoped to gain Jewish support for the Allied war effort during World War I. They also saw strategic advantages in having a friendly presence in the Middle East, near the Suez Canal. By 1947, Great Britain had decided it could no longer manage the situation in Palestine. The ongoing violence, the international pressure, and the financial strain were too much. Britain announced its intention to terminate its mandate. It handed over the problem of Palestine to the newly formed United Nations. The UN was seen as a neutral body that could find a fair solution. The UN created a special committee, UNSCOP, United Nations Special Committee on Palestine, to investigate the matter. UNSCOP members traveled to Palestine and heard testimonies from both sides. UNSCOP proposed two main solutions. The majority plan recommended the partition of Palestine into two independent states, one Arab and one Jewish. Jerusalem was to be placed under a special international regime, administered by the UN. This was because of its religious significance to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. The UN General Assembly debated these proposals. The partition plan, Resolution 181-2, was put to a vote on November 29, 1947. It required a two-thirds majority to pass. The vote was intensely lobbied by both Zionist and Arab representatives. The resolution passed with 33 votes in favor, 13 against, and 10 abstentions. Section 5. Divided Land, Divided Peoples, Reactions to the UN Plan. The Jewish community in Palestine, the Yishuv, and Jews worldwide greeted the UN partition plan with immense joy and celebration. For them, it was a momentous occasion. It represented international recognition of their right to a state in their ancestral homeland. After centuries of exile and persecution, culminating in the horrors of the Holocaust, the prospect of sovereignty was deeply meaningful. Leaders of the Yishuv, like David Ben-Gurion, immediately began preparations to establish the institutions of the new state. They saw the UN resolution as a legal and moral basis for their independence. However, the Arab world reacted to the UN partition plan with widespread anger and rejection. Palestinian Arabs and Arab leaders across the region viewed the plan as a grave injustice. They argued that it violated the principle of self-determination. They felt that the UN, influenced by powerful Western nations, had no right to divide their land and give a significant portion of it to a minority population, many of whom were recent immigrants. Immediately after the UN vote, violence escalated sharply in Palestine. Arab militias launched attacks against Jewish communities and transportation. Section 6. May 1948. The Declaration of Israel and the outbreak of war. As the British Mandate neared its end, the situation in Palestine deteriorated rapidly. The civil war between Jewish and Arab forces intensified. Jewish forces, better organized and increasingly well-armed, began to gain the upper hand in many areas. They launched operations to secure the territories allocated to the Jewish state under the UN plan. On May 14, 1948, one day before the British Mandate was due to expire, David Ben-Gurion, the head of the Jewish Agency, proclaimed the establishment of the State of Israel. The declaration took place in Tel Aviv. It stated that the new state would be based on freedom, justice, and peace. The United States recognized the new state almost immediately, followed by the Soviet Union a few days later. For the Jewish people, it was a moment of historic triumph and the fulfillment of a long-held dream. The Arab states, however, refused to accept the new reality. Section 7. The Human Cost. Jewish Joy and Arab Nakba. The establishment of the State of Israel in May 1948 was a moment of profound joy and relief for Jews around the world. After centuries of persecution and the recent trauma of the Holocaust, the creation of a sovereign Jewish state was seen as a miraculous achievement. It offered a refuge and a guarantee of security. For the Jews living in Palestine, it meant the end of foreign rule and the beginning of self-determination. They had fought hard for their independence, and the victory, though costly, was celebrated as a national triumph. The new state immediately opened its doors to Jewish immigrants from all over the world. For the Palestinian Arabs, however, the events of 1948 were a catastrophe, known as the Nakba. During the 1948 war, an estimated 700,000 to 750,000 Palestinian Arabs fled or were expelled from their homes in the territory that became Israel. They became refugees in neighboring Arab countries, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Hundreds of Arab villages were depopulated and subsequently destroyed. The Palestinian refugee crisis created a major humanitarian problem. The refugees lived in squalid camps, often lacking basic necessities. Section 8. Shifting Sands. Immediate impacts on regional politics. The 1948 war and the establishment of Israel dramatically reshaped the political landscape of the Middle East. The war ended with armistice agreements signed in 1949 between Israel and its neighboring Arab states, Egypt, Lebanon, Transjordan, and Syria. Iraq did not sign an agreement but withdrew its forces. These agreements established new de facto borders, often referred to as the Green Line. Israel controlled about 78% of former mandatory Palestine, significantly more than the 56% allocated to it under the UN partition plan. The remaining territories, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip, came under Jordanian and Egyptian control respectively. The Arab defeat in the 1948 war had profound consequences within the Arab world. It led to widespread disillusionment with existing Arab regimes. Many Arabs felt humiliated by the inability of their armies to prevent the creation of Israel or to protect the Palestinian Arabs. This sense of failure contributed to political instability and the rise of new nationalist and revolutionary movements in several Arab countries. The Palestinian cause became a rallying cry for Arab nationalism and a source of inter-Arab political maneuvering. The conflict also drew in major world powers more deeply. Section 9. The Lingering Legacy, 1948 and the Modern World. The events surrounding the establishment of Israel in 1948 continue to have profound and lasting implications for global politics. The Arab-Israeli conflict, born out of these events, remains one of the world's most intractable disputes. The core issues from 1948 borders, the status of Jerusalem, and the fate of Palestinian refugees are still unresolved. These issues have fueled multiple wars and decades of violence. They continue to be a major source of instability in the Middle East, a region of vital strategic importance due to its energy resources and geopolitical location. The Palestinian refugee issue, in particular, remains a central obstacle to peace. Millions of Palestinians, Descendants of those who fled or were expelled in 1948 still live in refugee camps or in diaspora.